Welcome, everybody, to another amazing episode of Wellness Warriors. I'm Dr. Vera Desonier, better known as Dr. V. And today we have a very special guest, Vera Ventura. So Vera and I were introduced to each other through a mutual friend, and Vera's story is very, very fascinating. She's a breast cancer conqueror. And she basically navigated the two worlds, evidence-based natural medicine and allopathic medicine. And as we hear her story, you'll see that the balance of both really is necessary at times. And that's when we're so grateful and appreciative of modern medicine because of all the things that they can do. So Vera, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so super grateful to be here. And I absolutely love your book, Heal Breast Cancer Naturally. I mean, from everything I've done in the last, 2.5 years since I've been on this journey and navigated the two worlds, no book has put it all in one place such as your book has. So if you're listening to this and you haven't gotten the book yet, you need to get the book right now. Just do it.
It is so succinct and it just puts it all in there. I mean, sometimes it's just overwhelming how much great information there is. They're just like, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And, recently we turned off our routers, and I had already heard about turning off the routers and turning off the Wi-Fi and all that. But your book, again, put it all out there, down to what to eat, down to, even the high glycemic fruits and vegetables, or mostly fruits. Just you put it all out there, Veronique, really.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the plug. I appreciate it. No, I am very proud of my book. It's got years, decades of information in there. So let's start with your journey. So November 2019. So did you feel the lump yourself? Did you just kind of have a gut feeling something was off? How did you discover you had cancer?
Yeah, great question. How does anyone discover they have cancer, right? It's a big question. So I was pretty, very in tune with my body, starting at 24. So I discovered I had cancer at 40, but starting at 24, I had been on a very serious journey of healing and awareness around my body. I had been bulimic from the age of 16 to 24, and I had struggled with my weight and compulsive behaviors around food, alcohol, drugs, and even men. So I had joined a 12-step program for addiction starting at 24, and embedded in the program is no flour, no sugar, meditation every day, half hour of meditation, a conscious contact with a higher power. And in that time, I discovered yoga. So because I needed a place to put my crazy manic energy, and drugs, alcohol, and anything mood altering wasn't going to cut it anymore because of this spiritual path that I decided to, prescribe myself to. So I went on that journey of yoga and healing. I started doing acupuncture and chiropractic, all the stuff that you mentioned in your book, just as part of the healing process. So I'm prefacing this by saying I was very, very aware of my body. So with my second child, I was breastfeeding her. And I think we were on the 4th year of breastfeeding. I'm a big fan of breastfeeding. And my first child stopped after 10 months. I went to Puerto Rico for a work event. I came back and he was like, no mas. And so my daughter was still like going for it. And I started to feel this like lump, on my breast. And I thought, wow, that's curious. It's probably a blocked milk duct, most likely it's blocked. So I went to, I think her pediatrician or someone in the eye, and I said, look, this is happening. And, oh yeah, most likely a blocked milk duct. And just got the confirmation from like a Western medicine doctor. That's probably a blocked milk duct, If you say it, they'll disagree with you if you truly believe it.
Right.
But finally, it's my mom who was the nudge, My mom is a nudge, and in Yiddish, that's like a fetch. Like she's always kind of like telling me I should do things for my health, because I don't like to do anything really Western medicine for my health, but getting checkups, things like this, I'm just like, I'm good, thank you. And she said, Vera, have you gotten a mammogram? And, I'm not a big fan of the whole mammogram thing. Mom, leave me alone. Like, I'm not even 40 yet. Leave me, enough is enough. And, she said, you should really get your breast checked. You should really something, she was the one actually telling me. And finally, I did see another doctor, and they said, yeah, this doesn't feel right. You should probably get a mammogram. And I know now, in retrospect, there's other ways to detect. You can do thermography, right? Thermography, and find heat concentrations in the body. And there's other ways, but in this time, that's really all I really knew. Since then I've done a ton of research and I know now. But at the time, I just did a mammogram, and they smush your breast like a little chicken cutlet. And and then, from at that point, I discovered that, it was breast cancer in both breasts.
Both, wow.
Yes. And at that time, my husband was away in Saudi Arabia. He's a filmmaker. And so I was alone. I was with my children. And in that moment, you just turn to a higher power, a power greater than yourself. I really tried to stay out of fear and worry, because that feeds cancer. I didn't have those words at the time, but I knew any kind of stress is not going to be helpful for this situation. So I brought this sort of uncertainty into my meditation and allowed myself to grow from the experience, which I found really powerful. And of course, connecting to other people who had gone through the journey was really powerful. So I called another person who had cancer, breast cancer, and I talked to them about it. And I talked to my sponsor. And so I wouldn't use something addictively as a result of the diagnosis or prognosis. And then, it's just like gathering information. When I went to grad school at Harvard, and I studied education. And as a teacher, I was, I always love to teach on different subjects, right? But you can't just get up and teach. You have to gather all the information. So I found the journey of breast cancer to be gathering information. So that was the first step of like, okay, what is it? And then of course they revealed this is stage whatever, it was stage 1 and 2. So, now I now know that it's actually, it was metastatic actually, but at that time, it was stage 1 and 2. And you start to do the interviews with the experts and talk to them. And, it was like writing a thesis paper. I was learning so much. And even at the breast care center, clinic, or wherever, they hand you this big giant textbook, and it's very dated in some ways and super Western, but you can learn from that as well.
Absolutely. So you had a biopsy to determine what kind it was?
Yes.
You had some genetic testing?
So that came later, a little bit later, because once they determined it was stage 1 and stage 2 on bilateral, they said, that's a little weird. You're not even 40 yet, or I wasn't even 40 yet. You're really healthy. You don't smoke, you don't drink, you really don't have a lot of stress. And like, what's going on? Are you, and we should get you genetically tested. So then I got genetic testing, and I've never had a test that actually asked me if I was an Ashkenazi Jew, because it's very prevalent in Ashkenazi Jews. And I thought, well, the cancer is really on my Sephardic side. And I learned later that it doesn't matter if you're Sephardic or Ashkenazi, because at the time during the Crusades, when the reproducing population of Jewish people was reduced to less than 350 women reproducing at one time, wow, it didn't matter if you were Ashkenazi or Sephardic, because the key to human evolution is genetic diversity. And if you cut that off, and if you inbreed, that's when there's problematic mutations within hereditary, within your hereditary makeup. And so as a result of that, genetic bottleneck. And there's a really good TED talk about it, because I became obsessed about this subject when I learned I was a carrier of this genetic mutation. It's a TED talk, and it's genetic. Just Google genetic bottleneck Ashkenazi Jews, and it's super fascinating. And so it didn't really matter at the time whether I was Sephardic or Ashkenazi, because we were all lumped in one category, just Jews, basically. European descendant Jews. And so I'd never seen a test that asked me if I was an Ashkenazi Jew, but I am. And so I checked it, and it turned out, yep, I have that genetic makeup. My father passed away from pancreatic cancer. My grandmother passed away from breast cancer. So most likely my father was a carrier, and thus I became a carrier.
Okay, so BRCA gene positive.
Yes. Yeah.
And how did your Western medicine doctors react to that? Did they think it was problematic? Did they have ways that you could support that gene, or they just said, well, it is what it is and you just have to deal with it?
That's a good question. I think knowing that was the gene, they had a different approach about how to target it. And I think it was more aggressive as a result of that. With the oncologist, I felt like what I went through was really aggressive. Like I went through probably hell and back. Yeah, because of that. And again, I wasn't armed with as much information now that then versus then. I knew that at that time, I was very resistant to chemotherapy, to the point where my doctors did have to have an intervention with me. And would I have still done it now versus how much I know now about chemotherapy? I still don't know. At the time I did it, but I knew I had to flush it all out every time. And I knew that I had to also support myself with lots of herbs and essential oils, and my diet was paramount. I still exercised through everything. So I knew I was doing this thing, this horrible thing I didn't want to do to my body. But it gave me comfort that I was also meeting it with all the things that I wanted to do too. And I remember I came to my oncologist and I said, okay, I'm doing it, but I'm also doing all this, I'm doing the activated charcoal, the spirulina, my frankincense, my supplements, I'm doing all the things. And I will do your poison. I didn't say that.
Right.
I will do that, and so in a way, I'm grateful to have gone through it, because there's so many people who do choose that path that I can help and talk to about how to go through that path as well, combining it with the allopathic